Hi, good morning and good evening, Akash and everyone.
Morning and evening. Welcome back.
Hi, Monira.
Hi, Damien. Hi, Lisa. And hi, Jigna. Hi, Sally.
Good morning. Can you all hear me I'm doing different audio today, so I don't have to wear the headset.
We can hear you.
Yes,
Yeah, we can hear you, Sally.
thank you.
Awesome.
All right, let's wait for a few more people for a couple of minutes. Now it's time for us to start.
I've still got the note with the handwriting written in front of me from yesterday. I'm like, what did I write? Was this me?
All right. All right.
Hi, everybody. Good day. Xenia here.
Hello, Zinnia.
Hi, Xenia.
Hi, Xenia.
Hi, everybody.
We'll just get to 10 and start so that we can have good conversations in the breakout, and then we'll get others onboarded as they join in. Thanks, Lisa, for being on the video. I'm going to request everyone else to be on video as well, as much as possible. Okay, I think Anubha has joined as well, so that gets us to, 8 participants. Let's begin. Let's begin in the interest of time, and we'll onboard others as they join in. Welcome back, everyone. We are doing the DiSC certification, day 1. We spent some time on looking at some words that we use to describe a person's psychological makeup, right? In terms of talent, in terms of strengths, and in terms of skills. And we also discussed how, you could take a different view of skills and behaviors yesterday. We would get into a bit of neuroscience to really create a strong foundation for us in terms of how to look at strengths, how to look at behaviors, how to assess them. And then we will get into DiSC, and that's the larger part of the session today. I'd like to get you all to look back, think about the outcomes from yesterday, and then come back and see if we are all on the same page. So what I like to do is to get all of us into groups, and you have a simple question to answer. What do you mean by strengths? What do you mean by strength? In whatever context that you want to speak about, if you could discuss that in your groups and come back. It's a short conversation of 10 minutes in the groups. And when you come back, let's share our understanding and any other perspective that might have developed overnight for all of you. So I'm going to make breakout rooms. Your question is, what do you mean by strength? And we're going to have, okay, let me see how many people are there. Okay, so let's just have, let's have 4 rooms. All right. Please join your breakout rooms. Tigna and Anubhuti, you might want to stay back. Okay.
Akash, I had a query.
Yeah.
If I leave this meeting, then the recording will go, or should I just
No,
go?
no, you can leave, no problem.
Recording will not stop, no?
No, no, no. It is showing for me and you both, so that's fine.
Okay, okay. Okay, have a nice session. Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you. Anubhuti, feel free to leave if you want to, okay?
Sorry.
Feel free to leave. It's okay. I'll
Okay.
manage.
Okay, okay. Thanks.
Thanks.
I guess the
Yes,
other.
we are the first ones.
Yeah.
Welcome back. Are you all able to hear me?
Yes.
All right, thanks. I've been having audio issues this morning.
It's been raining here in Bangalore, so you might just.
Yeah, no, I was trying to set up a new headset and that didn't get set up and it just spoiled the audio settings. So it's been a
Oh.
bit. All right, great. Everyone's back. Welcome back, everyone. Let's do a quick round robin. Let's understand what we recollect of our conversations, any new perspectives emerging. So room one, what are strengths?
All
right,
right.
so
Your conversations.
Yes, room one. Room one is. All right.
Damien, we are room 4.
Anjan,
room four.
Kavita, and
I
Sally.
was I
Okay.
thought I was relooking at my memory power.
Got
I
that
said, did I
wrong.
see
Yeah,
four or
sorry
did I
about
see
that.
one? So- All right, so I'll start off and then maybe Sally and Kavita can chime in if necessary, Akash. So we discussed about strengths quite in detail to understand. Firstly, I think we were trying to define strengths from our connotations that we had yesterday. We believe a certain set of talent, skill, and traits together in a neat and with a lot of interest and passion to do something kind of defines strength uh, in a term, in essence. Now, the example that we took to discuss was, say, simply as cooking. So when you have, there's a slight difference between somebody who has a strength to cook versus somebody who can cook. So there could be a person who has a skill to follow a recipe, A, B, C, D. He does cooking, so it's a skill. But a person whose natural instinct in terms of his love, passion for cooking, and he has a natural instinct in terms of flavors and things which come to him. So that becomes a strength for that person that he's able to showcase that consistently, time and again. And that's how we were able to connect the dots back to what we had to do. And in a setting, I think Kavita made a very nice example in a setting that we have in work. So where we are communicating. So there could be a person who's good at communicating and who can probably speak well. It could be a tick in the box, but a person who's prepared well and has a lot of context to what he's speaking, that shows up and that becomes more looked as a strength because he knows what he's talking with a lot of background that comes behind it. And it's coming, and yes, his skills are used, his talent is used, but there is a lot of passion in terms of what background work and the groundwork that he's done and prepared. It would make a lot of difference in when a person speaks in a professional setting. So that's something that we had. Sally, Kavita, in case I missed anything, please feel free to.
No, you encompassed everything well. The word that we constantly used in our conversation was consistent. It has to be consistent. And Sally brought up one of the strengths that you shared yesterday, and we revisited some of the words there. And that was the key that came out. So the consistency in ability, application is what leads to your strength, right? Sally, would you like to add something here?
I think that sums it up. Yeah, it's enjoying what you do. You can be good at something and not really enjoy it, but if you're good at it and it gives you energy and joy, that's also strength.
Thank you very much. All right. Room 2, what do you have to add to that? Anubha, Lindy, and Zinnia.
So I can go first, and then Anuba and Lindy, please do jump in. I think, echoing what you said, Kavita, and actually everyone in room 1, we did speak about consistency. Always practicing the certain skills that on, somewhere down the line lead to a strength. We also talked about certain famous personalities and how they are, masters or experts in their area on account of that practice. And finally, then we also said that a strength could also be your identity in the world, right? Sometimes we just take certain people's names and we know already, what is their area of expertise or where they really shine in the world. So we thought that that was, something that was very particular about strengths. And then we talked about how strengths could also, we want to avoid strengths becoming our weaknesses, because sometimes, we go into overdrive, or we don't know the balance perhaps that we need to strike when demonstrating our strengths, and maybe that could lead to us resenting those strengths or not really wanting to showcase them in such a way anymore. So it something that was so joyful, or something that really gave us a sense of purpose and fulfillment, somewhere down the line, like I think Sally or Kavita, one of you said, right, something that you don't enjoy somewhere down the line, right, could then disqualify, or I wouldn't say disqualify, but at least put you a few steps behind and calling this your strength, at least somewhere down the line. So these were some of the thoughts that we had. Anuba, Lindy, anything else?
Thanks, Zenia, for the summarization. So Akash, we were also thinking about the question that what if I do not exercise my strength on a consistent basis? What will I call it then? Because then I'm moving from great to being good, maybe in performing that particular job or task. So if not exercised in a consistent manner, it is going to affect my performance. And so can I call it my occasional strength, or is it still a strength, or is it a potential strength? Like, of course, the terminology we can discuss, but where will that fall into? Like, what bucket will that fall into?
I think the other part of our discussion, thanks, Zenia and Anuba, was others recognizing it as our strength. So it's not only that we see it in ourselves, but we become known for it. So others see it as our brand or our strength, and they seek us out because of that.
So thanks a lot for that. Are we mixing up talent and strength, or are we saying that strength is essentially in an area of talent?
Anuba, will you say that line that you said I didn't capture all of it, but you said talent?
So we said that talent is potential, and when we work on that potential, it's leading us to, we are acquiring new skills, and that over time, if done consistently and we are producing high performance, becomes strength. But here, what I am specifically talking about is, let's say, let's pick up an example. Let's say connecting to people is my strength, but now my job doesn't involve connecting with people. So now I'm not being consistent with it, which means my performance is getting affected. So will this go back to my talent, or will this still be considered my strength? I think that's the question.
All right. Okay. Are you better than others in connecting with people? That's the question.
Yeah, I would love to think so. Yeah.
Right. And then that remains your strength, because, it's also, there's a comparison there, right? It's not just among all the skills and talents that you have, which one is, where do you perform consistently well? But it's also compared to others, where do you tend to score more, right? So that's typically how we look at it.
That makes sense. Yeah. So the benchmarking is not just you and your performance, but also others around you. Okay. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Akash.
And of course, if you do not, Munira, if you do not use your strength, which means if you do not use your habit consistently, then obviously you may lose that edge, over a period of time. And one of the reasons why we said that strength is usually in an area of talent is because if it is in an area of talent, it comes easily to you, and you would in all probability like to be immersed in that task and in that activity that utilizes your talent. And so you will be able to maintain your strength easily with lesser mental effort. Right. Okay, thank you. Let's go over to room 3. I'm still looking for a couple of new perspectives. These are in Matt, that was a small group.
Yes. I'll start, and Matt, if you want to jump in. We're just going to piggyback on what a lot of the other groups have said, but what we want to add is that a strength is being at the top of the learning curve. The talent, the skill, the knowledge are all building blocks to become a strength. And, we talked about the aspects of being really skilled at something and that it comes naturally to us and we really enjoy it and we can do it consistently are all aspects of strength. A lot of what we discussed has already been mentioned. Matt, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think that's pretty much it really, the high minimal effort, high impact, because it is a strength. So as you consistently build on, so in the proficiency level, right? Because this is your strength, say, it's much easier for you to do it and perfect the craft, so to speak, because that's your strength. I always go back to Beyonce, who is so good at singing, but ups the ante by singing and dancing at the same time without panting, because that is a strength. I mean, there's levels in singing, and that's one. Try belting out a high note and singing and dancing at the same time in high heels. That's absolute strength. But it didn't take, it took years to build, but I'm sure because that's her strength, it was easier for her compared to me. I mean, I can't dance in heels and belt out a high note, but maybe I can sing. So that's kind of how we discussed that top of the learning curve and kind of just flesh that out, because it may come naturally, but it's difficult. But maybe for her, Beyonce, it's easier, even if that part is difficult, because that is a strength. So yeah, that's just to flesh out that top of the learning curve piece.
Sure. All right. Thank you. Okay, room 4.
Yes, Akash, I'll get going for room 4. I'll begin and then Munira and Roy will probably chip in. Our definition of strength, yesterday, to do a little recap on what we learned yesterday, we learned that weakness was inefficiency. So, which means strength should be efficiency. So when we describe efficiency, we are talking about how you effectively respond to any circumstance, a given situation, or a challenge. Those are the 2 points that I have. And then Munira and Roy had something else as well. Yes,
Thanks,
Munira,
Damien.
over to you.
Thanks, Damien. Yeah, so I think Damien and the rest of the groups have kind of summarized it. I think just one bit to add here is you would use your strengths more when in challenging situations or when in a difficult position. You would gather all the attributes that are related and similar to your strengths to be able to move ahead and move past a difficult situation, right? I think that's what is more important when someone speaks of what are your strengths, and you would rely on these attributes and these it could be courage, it could be your sense of negotiation, communication, various other attributes that are very important, essential for coordinating with a team or leading a team or managing high profile clients, business units, right? So I think that's what is important when you speak of strengths.
Sure. All right, thank you. How about behavioral strengths? How are the behavioral strengths different from skill-based strengths? Did anyone have that conversation in the room?
Yes, we did, Akash, because we picked that piece from there because under behavior, we discussed about your efficiency in performing a particular talent or excelling in a particular skill.
Mhm.
The ability to do that. Am I audible?
Yes.
I thought I froze for a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so you did discuss that, right?
Yes, we did.
Yeah. So, I just want to thank you so much, Dimin. So I just wanted to kind of reinforce the fact that typically when we talk about behavioral strengths, we talk about the frequency of behaviors. Which are those behaviors that you use very often? And those behaviors are typically called your strength behaviors, or your behavioral style, or your home style, or your natural style. We use a lot of, there's a lot of jargon around there. But when we talk about strength from a skills perspective, we essentially talk about what you can do better than others. What can you ace, really? So from a skill and a behavioral perspective, strengths are defined differently. And therefore, in skills, you build on your strengths, but in behaviors, you don't build on your strengths, you build flexibility. You learn how to adapt your behavior to different situations. And that's the key difference, between the two. Is everyone on board with that idea?
Just explain a little further, please, because when you say flexibility and adaptability, even, for your skills, you need both, right? Even when you're like, we're going back to our example of cooking. If cooking is a strength, if you have limited ingredients and you have to make the same dish, it is adaptability and flexibility there also. So
but you're right. However, if I were to make a career, out of cooking because I'm a good cook, that might be a good bet. So if I can get to the most advanced level of cooking where I can, perhaps cook some really, esoteric, some, dishes, bread, dishes and, various cuisines, that would be awesome. My best opportunity for growth, my best opportunity for learning is when I build on that strength, as opposed to, say, going and learning Mandarin, which will be a completely different learning for me, right? So instead of investing in learning a completely different skill, if I can get to the most advanced level of my skill, then that's the best opportunity for learning. And I could give you a couple of examples. There was this very nice experiment done by Gallup on strengths, and this experiment was essentially around fast reading. So what they took is that they took a set of people, a group of people, random set of people. They divided them into two groups: one who were natural fast readers, and those who were natural slow readers. Okay, and they put both the groups through the same training program on fast reading. Which group do you think would have gained more from the training?
The proverbial slow and steady wins the race.
The fast readers.
All right, any other views?
I would say both. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Both will gain equally, because the faster would become faster and people who are slow might improve. An analogy that way.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact data, but let's say, just for our conceptual understanding, fast readers could read 100 words a minute, and slow readers on an average could read, say, 40 words a minute. Okay.
So are we
And
just gauging how fast they can read? That's
post
not
the
how much they
program, yeah.
comprehend? Okay.
Right. So that's equally important, of course, but it was really about how much can you read. And the point is that they were put through the same training program on fast reading. What they found was that the fast readers gained 40% more than the slow readers.
Because they were already fast, right? They're building on their strength.
They're building on their strengths. And so the best bang for the buck is to build on the strengths. That's easier, you're more engaged, you're going to sustain that learning. And perhaps that's the best, utilization use of your time. Whereas in behaviors, we can't really build on our strengths or the behaviors that we're already using very often. We cannot, as we said yesterday, we cannot further enhance our reliance on certain behaviors. We need to build flexibility. We need to learn how to use behaviors that we haven't used much before in certain situations. And that's why behavioral learning is typically more difficult than skill learning, because you're not really working in an area of strength. Okay, everyone.
I agree with that. If I'm building the skill of having to learn Excel, that's, I don't know. I guess I could learn it, but yeah, certainly not enjoyable.
But if you were building on your strengths, let's say if you were good in Excel and then you had to get to the advanced level of learning Excel, then, that would be easier than learning something which is completely different in adulthood, right? All right, thank you very much, everyone, for looking back and kind of recapping. Let's get into today's session. I'm going to, start with a bit of neuroscience and then go back to go forward to DiSC. Yesterday we were talking about how our behavioral style is formed, and we said there are three drivers, the three triggers of learning, which was physiology, cognition, and environment. If you really see how these three things really influence our personality and who we are, another way to kind of look at it is to look at our neural network and what's happening in the brain. Many of you would know that brain consists of billions of these neurons, and neurons are these nerve cells, and these nerve cells collaborate with each other to form our unique experience. That's how they express the unique experiences that we have. That's a typical nerve cell, and you have billions of these neurons, and billions of these neurons create billions of networks in our brains. And because of our genetic, physiology, environment, and cognition, this network is unique to us. Each person has a unique network. It's not really a copy of the network that another person has. What happens when you think a thought? When there is a thought in the brain, essentially, one neuron collaborates with the other neuron and forms what is called a synaptic connection. That's where the neurons meet, right? And there are, large number of these networks in the brain. But if you think the same thought again, electricity flows through this network, that's a thought. But if you think the same thought again, electricity flows through this flow of electrons through the same network. And if you tend to use this network again and again, then this network actually physically thickens, and it becomes a low resistance network, a network where electricity is able to flow very easily. And that, by the way, is called hardwiring of neurons or of a network. That is how a habit is that's how a habit physiologically exists. That's how a strength physiologically exists. It exists as a network, as a hardwired network. And so if I've been swimming for a long time and I have a hardwired, network for swimming, if you were to put me into the pool or throw me into the pool, I would start swimming without really thinking about how to swim. Because the moment this network is triggered, electricity would flow through the entire network. I would start, moving my hands and legs and breathing in the right way, and I would be able to swim, just like writing with my dominant hand. I would be able to do that without any mental effort. This is called a hardwired network, and perhaps one of the the reason why unlearning is difficult is because you can't really get rid of a network. Only if when you don't use a network for some time that it will start fading away, and that's how you really unlearn any habit or any strength. Let me just pause here. I'm sure many of you would have different levels of knowledge about this, but this is just a little basic stuff. So anyone has any questions around this?
Not a question, Akash, but just so that it sits in my brain. I guess as you were describing this, what popped up for me, an image that popped up for me is if you think about like a college campus, and when they have sidewalks that are going, in some directions, but the students cut across the grass and then they start to wear out this path, and then all of a sudden it becomes wider and easier to navigate. Whereas originally it might have been a little bit more difficult because nothing had been forged yet. But then over time, because it's being used so often, it becomes its own pathway.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's exactly how it is, and that's a great analogy. And if I were to go back to what we were discussing yesterday, the whole path of conscious incompetence to conscious competence is really about that path forming. And as you use it, you get to a point where a network's kind of created, and you get to the conscious competence level. You still have to, apply yourself. You still need a lot of mental effort at the conscious competence level. But when you go down that path again and again, it becomes unconscious competence. Just like, it's called a shortcut. That's what we call it. Yeah, that was a good one, Lily. Thank you. Okay, another thing, we need to change the pattern of thinking, doing to rewire brain and build new neural networks, right? So if I were to perhaps, get over a certain habit that's not working for me, then what would you do? What neuroscience is saying is that it's perhaps, if you have a hardwired network for something, instead of trying to get rid of a network, try modifying that network. So if you're really used to having, say, 20 cups of coffee and you think that's not working for you, you need to get rid of that habit, well, replace 20 cups of coffee with, say, green tea or something more healthy. And that's an easier bet than really stopping having coffee completely, totally. So modifying a network might be a easier way to get over, habits. Right. I would like to talk about 3 rules here that kind of define how these networks are formed. It's also called the Hebbian rule of learning. And the Hebbian rule of learning tells us that first, neurons that fire together wire together. What that means is that, let's go back to the college campus that Lily was talking about. When I say the college campus, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Networking.
Networking, okay.
Friends.
Friends, okay.
Maybe where you get to, so more like friends, but you get to build relations with people.
Sure,
Just in
okay.
terms of the neuron that fire together, wire together. So it is an
So-
inclination or thought whether you have like-minded people meeting in the same
Okay,
place.
so when I say the word college campus, what comes to your mind? Do you think about the college building? Do you think about your friends, your college days? What are you thinking about?
I think the
Learning
food
together,
and the hostel.
learning to get, sorry, Anwar. Learning together, right?
Learning together.
As a community.
Okay. Anyone else?
It's hostel and food for me. Yeah. Hostel and the food.
The
Terrible
hostel
food.
and the food in the hostel. Okay.
Yeah.
Probably a new level of freedom
A
after
new level
school.
of freedom. Right. So when I
Fun,
say the word,
Akash. Fun
sorry,
unlimited
fun
college.
unlimited. All right. All right. When I say the word college campus, you think about things you associate with the college or your college life, but you wouldn't think of something like the parking in your office, because that's a completely different network. And the parking in the office didn't happen together with the college campus. And that's why the network for college campus has nothing to do with your office building or the parking space in the office building. And those are the first two rules, that neurons that fire together, wire together. If you are, let's say, enjoying a training session on a certain subject, then you tend to like that subject as well. Then you tend to like the trainer as well, or the teacher as well. But if you were to, if your teacher likes you and you like the teacher, you also like the subject that they're teaching. And that's what is associative learning. However, when you are, when the two things don't go together, on the time scale, then those networks don't connect with each other. Okay. That's a simple one. But the one that I like to really highlight is the third rule, which is that the brain is constantly trying to optimize its networks. It has this real estate issue. It's kind of stuck inside the skull, and so it needs to make best use of the space. So it has evolved to fade away, dissipate the networks that are no longer in use. So when you have a certain habit or a certain thought and you stop thinking about it, or you stop practicing it, it would start fading away in the brain. If, of course, that network is very strong, so let's say I was swimming for like 20 years and really good at swimming, and then I quit swimming for 5 years. When I get back into the pool, it's not going to take me long to, get my rhythm, probably a few minutes. However, if I have learned swimming for just a week, I have a weak network for swimming, and then I quit swimming for, say, 5 years, I'll have to probably start all over again. And that's because that network would have very quickly dissipated. It was a weak network. What are we saying here? What we're saying here is that we need to constantly practice to keep the network going. And that is a conversation we were having earlier. And what if I don't practice my strength? Will it remain my strength? Well, really, it depends on how big that strength was and how deep-rooted that strength was. How good that network was. From a neuroscience perspective, what is talent? From a neuroscience perspective, talent is those naturally, genetically predisposed strong networks. We all have different networks. So 75–80% of this network in our brain is genetically predisposed. And of course, our environment and cognition has a huge effect on it. However, a large part of it could be genetically predisposed. And that's essentially what refers to as talent, in common parlance. So if we could go back to all these words and kind of look at it from a neuroscience perspective, it's all about networks. whether you have a strong network or a weak network or something. And if you have a weak networks, it requires a lot more attention and focus to do that activity. If it's a strong network, it requires lesser energy, lesser mental effort to carry out that activity. Yeah. So that's kind of, you know, it's actually simpler to look at it from a neuroscience perspective. Okay, any questions? Thanks for the thumbs up, Matt.
Akash, I think what I remember is the 10,000 hour practice rule. And just to build that, I guess, unconscious competence for skill. And yeah, this explains it. I love the neuroscience explanation behind 10,000 hours of practice and practicing it well.
Right, perfect. You know, I'm not sure about the number, but certainly repetition is the key. Repetition is the key to making a strong network. Right.
I
Akash,
think
is
about
this
that in
what-
relation to language learning, for example, and the whole hardwire issue of learning a second language. You could have studied for 4 years in college, that could have been your major, and then you don't do anything with it, and you really don't maintain the fluency that you had. But if you studied it and then you lived in that other culture for 8, 9, 10 years, it becomes hardwired. I mean, it comes to, there's times I can't think of an English word because the Spanish word comes first, right? And there's that because it's become hardwired because of the repetition of using it in a context every day, as opposed to just having learned it and not applied it.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Sally, in fact, there are 3 drivers, if I could kind of spell out for you. One is, of course, repetition. And when we say repetition, we don't just mean, you know, attending something in a classroom, but also applying it because you need to fire those networks again and again. The second is emotions, right? When you have an emotional experience, you remember it for long. The currency of memory is emotions. When you have an emotional experience, it's much deeper. You also tend to replay that experience in your mind a lot more when it was an emotional experience. And so it actually goes back to repetition, because, you know, emotional experience is something that we tend to think about again and again and kind of repeat it, you know, imagine it again and again. The third is the time frame. When we say time frame, experiences which are early in life, childhood, memories, and they have been repeated, they tend to be far deeper in our brain, and therefore, the earlier memories have a greater chance of surviving through a lifetime. Right, so those are the 3 kind of drivers that also we need to think about when we think about neural networks. Thanks. Kavita, were you saying something?
Yes.
Sorry.
Is this what, which is loosely referred to as muscle memory? Conversationally, we'll say do it repeatedly. It becomes, you develop a muscle memory of sorts. So some of all this is what we'd refer to that?
That's right. And that's what is unconscious competence. It's a muscle memory. A muscle memory is a memory where you use conscious brain. You consciously don't do something, but you automatically do it, right? For example, if you've driven for thousands and thousands of miles, you don't really need to think about driving. You can automatically kind of drive your way through. You don't need to apply yourself, right? That's a muscle memory. So I like to discuss 2 experiments in neuroscience just to get our perspective on behavioral learning over a period of time. I think I want to really apply it to behavioral learning. So I have 2 experiments to kind of discuss, one on neuroplasticity Neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to change itself, to modify networks, right? And neurogenesis is the birth and proliferation of new neurons in the brain, which means, neurons are the raw material, and the networks, you, with experience and with certain predispositions, you create those networks, and your ability to change and modify those networks is what is, what is called neuroplasticity, right? So there was one experiment which is done around learning with piano, and that's coming up, So what the scientists did was that they took a set of people, divided them into 3 groups. Group 1 practiced, they were all of them were new to piano. Group 1 was asked to practice a pre-decided sequence on a piano. So they were given access to a piano, and they were given a sequence, and they had to practice that sequence. Group 2 was not given the sequence, but they were just given the piano, said, hey, just play around, Group 3 was neither given the piano nor the sequence. They were asked to observe group 1 and mentally rehearse the sequence. Okay. Which group had the maximum learning? Which group had the best learning here? And which one had the minimum? So if you can actually give me the sequence, if you can put that on the chat, from maximum to minimum. So was it 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 2, 3, 2, 1, whatever was the sequence? Freuden's saying 1, 3, and 2. Okay. Anjan is saying the same. Zinnia is saying the same. Kavita is saying 3, 2, 1. Lady is saying 1, 3, 2. Okay. Munira and Damien 3, 2, 1. 1, 3, 2. Okay. Any more? Soka 2. Is that a guess? Depends on learning styles, Sadi, okay? Which group, in other words, would have a strong network for piano, playing piano? Okay, I want to ask those who marked 3 to 1 to come off mute and kind of tell us, why they marked 3 to 1. Damien,
yeah,
Manira.
I think my reasoning for going with 3 to 1 is that when you observe what the other 2 people are doing, probably our intake is a lot more.
Okay.
And that gives you an edge of probably practicing a little more than what is required, because in group 1, they are confined to just play that predefined sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And group 2 is just some random. Here you have an edge of doing whatever you want. So that's my explanation for choosing 3 to 1.
My explanation, sorry, thanks, Damien. Akash, I think my explanation would be that group 3 would be under tremendous pressure to perform because they don't have anything to refer to.
All right. They might also be demotivated.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Anyone else? 3, 2, 1.
Akash, you could, sometimes more than doing, you learn better when you observe. That's probably the reason why I picked 3, 2, and 1. And, sometimes you set a process and people follow it. You actually observe if this works, doesn't work, and then get to a process improvement point. So whereas group 1 is, the horse with the blinkers, just doing what is told, just going wherever, whichever direction. Group 2 is like, a horse with maybe a wider blinker, Whereas group 3 has no blinkers. It's just observing what everything happens and is, learning that way. So that's the way I thought it was 3, 2, and 1.
Akash, another pointer here is that group 1 and group 2 has played the piano. I guess group 3 hasn't. They're just mentally rehearsing.
Right. Okay, let's go with 1, 3, 2 then again.
Well, Akash, in terms of 1, 3, 2, the reason being is, so the analogy that I could think of is group 1, they had a very proper, steady practice that they did. So it's of course going to show in the results that they have. And see, group 2 are just playing random notes, but group 3, and I agree with Kavita that they have that pressure because they've not been given any instruments, but they have to have a lot of observation and focus in terms of what they are observing, because that's what is available with them in terms of a resource to go there and finally execute what they have to, which is why it's a 1, 3 and a 2, probably because the last that they play random notes, so they don't have any pressure, the way I see it. So they have the least amount of pressure. They have nothing that they can go wrong. You just go in and have fun and just do whatever they have to. So they have nothing to worry. But that's how 1, 3, that's how I kind of analyzed 1, 3, and 2.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anyone else?
I chose 1, 3, 2. I think 1 would have the highest level of learning because they're given a structured plan and they're given the piano to practice. So not only are they having some mental guidance, they're also practicing in a physical way, and their muscles are learning how to, play the keys. I think group 3 would benefit from the observation of that and the repetition of that, even though they don't have the piano. They've got the mental investment, so that they're able to see it happen. Group 2, even though they have a piano, they're just kind of tinkering around. I know I've tinkered around on a piano and I cannot play it. So that was my thinking for choosing them in that order.
Right. Thank you. Let's go back to those neural networks. What's learning? Learning is formation or modification of a neural network. How do networks form? They form and they become strong through repetition. Group 1 and group 3 have repetition. There is no repetition in group 2. You're just playing random notes. You don't repeat those notes. You're just playing randomly. And so group 2 is going to be the least. Now comes group 1 and group 3. Group 1, the experience is also very kinesthetic. You can touch and feel the piano. As much as you are practicing the same sequence and you're playing it again and again, over and over. And so that network is going to be a strong network. Number 3 isn't far behind. And the reason why it isn't far behind is because the only thing is that you don't have that kinesthetic experience. So maybe the learning is not complete. However, the brain cannot, and that's the outcome of this experiment, the brain cannot differentiate between reality and imagination. And so when you were rehearsing it mentally, you would still form that network. You would still form that strong network, even though it's not a complete network because, it doesn't have that kinesthetic aspect to it. But it's still a strong network of whatever it is. So group 1 and 3 were very close to each other. 1 was the maximum, and then 3, and then 2. Okay, so think about learning from the reason why structured learning works and the reason why skills are easier to learn is because you can go step by step and repeat it. And therefore skill learning is easier, right? Because it's essentially a sequence that you need to practice. right? Unlike behaviors, where a sequence is somewhat difficult. One more experiment. So any questions on this? Anyone wants to discuss anything or have any questions? Just pause for a moment.
I guess I depend on learning styles because of what you were talking about, like the kinetic learner. So if you had a kinetic learner in group 3, it would be more difficult for them than if they were in group 1. They would still learn some, but if they're not one that learns by visual and audio and all that, and they're really one that learns by doing, then for that style of learner, group 3 would not have been as effective as.
It also depends on, Sally, the activity, right, and what you're learning. I mean, you can't do a online course in swimming, right? It just has to be kinesthetic. So, if so it's also about that. But essentially, I think all that we're trying to say here is that you could mentally rehearse something and create a network for that. Yeah, but great point. Thank you so much. All right. One more experiment to bring out another, aspect of environment in learning. So here, in this experiment, the scientists actually got a set of adult rats, and they put them into 3 groups. Group 1 was a barren cage, lots of food, nothing much to do, but have food, rest, and a lot of siesta time there. Group 2 had a puddle of water there. So, rats are scared of water, so they were running away from it. But they also had optimal level of food, nutrition there. Group 3, they put cousins together, and there was a, nice social environment, but also optimal food and nutrition. Scientists were studying neurogenesis, birth of new neurons. If you have new neurons taking birth in your brain, then you have a greater opportunity to create networks and therefore greater opportunity, higher pace of learning. So neurogenesis is linked to or correlated with, pace of learning. Which group would have the highest pace of learning or highest neurogenesis, level of neurogenesis? Where would the learning be maximum?
Probably group 3. Reason is that you have a lot of people there together, so they can learn from one another. And the environment does not have a lot of pressure from what you explained, because they have food, there's an environment where you have things that to keep a person, or an individual, in this case the rat, occupied. So, and there are things that they can network and work with people. So once you feel safe and once you know that the environment is comfortable, I think you learn maximum. That could be an analogy we take from group 3.
Okay. Let's get some more.
But don't you also grow in crisis? So in group 2, like learning that you have to move around that puddle of water to stay alive and get back to wherever the food is in relation to the puddle. I know I've learned through crisis.
So only when you're challenged, do you actually look for solutions, Sally? That's what you're saying.
So Sally, I don't disagree, except that I think about it with kids in school. And so I live in a large city, Chicago, 3rd largest school district in the nation. And the kids who are below, poverty and who live in dangerous environments, their learning is significantly less than those students who live in safer environments and don't have to worry about that level. I'm not saying that they don't learn, but I think in terms of the ease in which they can learn and how much they're able to take in, because they don't have to worry about those other things. They don't have to worry about their nutrition. They don't have to worry about their safety. I think that comes into play.
Yeah, well, that's what I did. I mean, I put 3, 2, 1 and ultimately in the chat, because I think that.
See, and I think it would be 3.
Small, but-
I think it would be 3, 1, 2, because of that life-threatening component in number 2. If I have to worry about my safety going back and forth to school or in school, I'm definitely going to be impacted emotionally and not maybe necessarily ready to be able to learn optimally.
Okay. Thanks, Lindy. Thanks for that perspective. Anyone else?
I think if we take the same example and use it for a training room with all the facility and all the training environment that's suitable for a good training, then there is higher learning. We believe there would be higher learning with whatever feedback we would receive at, in training. But if the environment is not safe, and as Lindy spoke of and what Sally said, right, where trainees are in a situation where they're not able to concentrate on the learning that the trainer is providing, then there is very little to take away from any training. It could be behavioral, it could be skill, right? You've got the steps, the process in place, but the individual does not take maximum benefit out of a session. So that's my perspective.
Well, I think, I guess what I was thinking about is not necessarily a training class or a classroom, but learning. And that was the angle that I came from, is that we are learning things in the crisis. Might not be the structured learning of the classroom that we're being distracted from, but I was thinking about learning in a broader context as opposed to just a classroom.
Right. Okay. So, here's the perspective that that the scientists had. The first one was that group 3 and group 2 were far more, the learning was far more than group 1. And the reason was that there's lack of physical exercise. And physical exercise, it seems, is a great contributor to the pace of learning. Just because you have more oxygen supplied to your brain. The second reason was that there was a socially motivating environment. Now, what's a socially motivating environment? What do you mean by a socially motivating environment?
Does this go back to our triggers for learning?
Okay, but
I think
it does,
I think
but,
having people around who encourage you to probably invest in yourself and do better, more like a peer-to-peer support, if you look at it from that standpoint. Would that be a socially motivating environment, or somewhere where you're comfortable to learn from someone and not
Or
have
even
to
a healthy competition,
There's a
right? So I
healthy
think there's like there's the support that Anjan was speaking of. Completely agree. And then even, I was watching a show last night, and it happened to be somebody in college, and they were friendly, and there was like this healthy competition between them to see who could achieve more and do better.
Yeah. Okay. Because a social environment, an environment where there are other people, could be both motivating and demotivating, right? You may also end up in a perspective that somebody else is going to do the job, and you may not therefore take the responsibility. if you were playing tug of war, then there's a possibility that you may not put in your best effort. But if you were playing something like a relay race, where even though it's a team sport, there's a spotlight on individual performance. Everyone would be able to notice that, you are responsible for the team losing the game. You were the slowest, right? So even though it's a team sport, there's a spotlight on individual performance. A socially motivating environment is the one where the presence of others enhances your performance. And that happens when there is some spotlight on individual performance. And that's called actually social facilitation. And that's different from social loafing, which is where you kind of pass on your responsibility to others, right, in a team. The difference and how is that different from a non-threatening environment? And exactly what you said, Lindy, when there are friendly matches, when there are no big stakes, then it's okay. When kids play in the park, they compete with each other, they play, but end of the day, there is no big prize. They just play and they come back, and next day morning or next day evening, it's a completely new game and a new team, and so however, a lot of times when you look at sales folks, there could be a lot of competition, and competition could become unhealthy, and it could actually become threatening. And if you have big sales incentives, bigger the incentives, dirtier the game. And and that's a threatening situation. That's not a socially motivating environment. A socially motivating environment is the one where there are no big stakes, there is competition, there is some spotlight on individual performance. That's a socially motivating environment. When you have cousins and you're playing and doing things that you like, you're playing a friendly match, that's a socially motivating environment. So that was the second one. And third, of course, the non-threatening environment, because the more you have if you are in a threatening situation, you are in a fight or flight, response, and therefore you tend to do what you've always done. If you have a wild animal chasing you on a beach and you don't know swimming, your first reaction would be still to run, because you wouldn't be able to think about swimming or say, hey, okay, let me hop like a kangaroo today and not run. I mean, that's a very difficult one, right? You wouldn't write with your non-dominant hand in an exam. You would go back to your dominant hand in an exam when you're in a stressful situation. And we saw that yesterday. So threatening situation makes you do what you've always done. It doesn't make you flex your style. And therefore, and the last one was volitional goals, which is that the rats love to run. And so when they were on these pedal wheels and toys, that they could run on, they were happy about it. And if you had changed the toys to something that rats don't enjoy, then, it wouldn't lead to that level of neurogenesis. So what the scientists are saying really is that if you want to enhance your learning pace, and as trainers, especially behavioral trainers, if you really want to improve the effectiveness of training, first, well, I don't think we can control it much in the corporate world, but physical exercise is one, the first driver. The second is to create a socially motivating environment for learning. Have some competitions, but no big prizes. 2, 3, create a non-threatening environment, which means, don't link it to performance as much as possible. Don't link your development plans to performance or performance reviews and increments. And 4, let people learn what they want to learn, what they enjoy doing. This is also linked to talent. So if I play a sport, a group sport, it's good for me, but I should play a sport that I like, not the sport that others like. That's how I could actually increase the pace of learning. Yeah, those were the outcomes from this experiment. Questions, reflections? All right. Okay, so we are actually we're not halfway through, but I think this is a logical time for us to take a break. So if it is okay, let's take a break now. When we come back, we start with DiSC. We get into DiSC and we apply all these concepts to DiSC and see how we can drive behavioral change. Or would that be okay, everyone?
Sounds good.
Yes.
So let's be back in 18 minutes. That's okay. Yep, 18 minutes from now. It's 8 minutes to 8 in India. So let's be back at 10 past 8. About 18 minutes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Bye. See you. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Still have a minute to go.
Hi, Akash.
Hello, welcome back.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah,
Just trying to
gosh.
make sure I have the Nutella off my face.
Do you eat that with
Wow.
toast?
I had it with toast and peanut butter. I had to have peanut butter because of yesterday's conversation. Inside put Nutella.
Build that skill. Build that skill.
Peanut butter and Nutella is delicious, I gotta tell you.
So,
100%.
Akash, would it be fair to say eating is both a skill and a strength?
Yeah, I guess so.
For some of us, it might be a weekness.
All right.
For some of us, it might be passion as well to just eat.
Yeah, yeah. All right, great. I just want you to know I posted the link for yesterday's session on the chat. Sorry for the delay. It just took us time to work around Zoom and the download. I think there's some issue, but that's available to you for a week for you to kind of go through that. We also have, we will also have the rest of the sessions, coming up on a new link, and I'll keep sharing that with you. Okay. All right. So let's get to DiSC, and then perhaps at some point in time during the session today we'll do a recap. I want to start by having a quick conversation about the difference between behavior and personality. I'm sure many of you know this, but I think it's just worth mentioning it here that behavior is the observable part of the personality. It's a part of one's personality, but it's just that one part which is observable, and two, which is more adaptable than the personality overall. Your personality is really sum total of the values and the beliefs and the emotions and your knowledge, all of that put together, and just that response, that observable response, which we can perhaps adjust from one situation to the other, is the behavior. When we talk about DiSC as a tool, we're talking about a tool that is, remember that behavior is a part of personality. So it's a personality tool. However, it focuses a lot more on the behavior. And therefore, it's also a behavioral tool. Something like an MBTI is more of a personality tool, though it does measure elements of behavior as well. Most of the tools, behavioral or personality tools, it's difficult to differentiate which part they're looking at, but you can somewhat kind of say, because MBTI is a great personality tool, it's a good tool for self-awareness. When you're looking at teaching people how to adapt their behaviors, to be more effective in their roles, to be more effective interpersonally, then it's really more about behaviors, and therefore, typically DiSC is used, more frequently there. I wouldn't want to say that any tool is good or bad, but all tools have their own, pros and cons, and it's important to look at what your application is, before you make that decision. We will discuss DiSC, and somewhere I think I would also tell you if you can how you can categorize psychometric assessments, and then it's easy for us to decide which one to use where, right? So let's get into DiSC. DiSC is, before we get into understanding what DiSC is, it's important to understand that essentially it's a tool that helps us build self-awareness, be aware of what our own priorities and preferences are from a behavioral perspective, and what the priorities and preferences of others are, and by knowing ourselves and others, how to be more effective interpersonally. So at a very basic level, DiSC helps you build self-awareness and build interpersonal effectiveness. Those are the two kind of things. And of course, when you implement it across the organization, it helps you build a common language of talking about people's behavioral strengths, their behavioral limitations, etc. So, it kind of influences at a cultural level within the organization. It's important to know what DiSC is not. I think that's important. DiSC does not measure your skills. It's a behavioral tool. It's not a skill tool. It's also not an emotional intelligence tool. That means it does not tell you what your emotional intelligence score is, like some other assessments do. But of course, it does tell you how to be more agile emotionally, and that's something that it could address. Because your success depends on multiple factors in a role, in a job. For example, how happy you are with the culture of the organization, how well you fit in, how happy you are with the compensation that you have, or the skills that you bring to the table. And of course, your behavioral style. DiSC in itself is not enough to predict job success, right? And therefore, it's not really a good selection tool or a recruitment tool. DiSC could play a part in the recruitment process, but more so in a supporting role than the main role. You could use it to understand the candidate better, ask better questions in an interview, but it wouldn't be right to use DiSC to select or reject a candidate based on their DiSC style. Okay. Let me pause here and see if there are questions here. Any questions emerging?
Akash, this was an observation when we were sent the assessment. I very enthusiastically completed it really early. And I discussed this with my manager saying, this is where I'm placed. Do you think this is accurate for me? And he had a different response. So in a way, DiSC, the assessment itself tells us how we think we are, but there is also an aspect of how someone else views us, right? So would we be able to bridge that gap? Is there a purpose, or is there a point in doing that? Because if I'm conversationally, let's say I am a D, and it would be better if I was a C and D. The reason why I'm using this is because, I've heard conversations at office saying, you could be a DEC and so on. I really don't know how to interpret, but is it possible that I view myself one way, but someone else views me as, the difference between personalities, observations, and so on?
Absolutely. It is possible that people do have a different perception of you. Mm-hmm. Not completely, but on certain aspects at least. However, most of the behavioral or personality assessments are self-assessments. Okay. All right, and they're not really assessments where you get others to kind of tell you what your style is. Mm-hmm. Because what is also happening is that their own style is interfering in that interpretation, right? And in that analysis. So it does make sense mm-hmm. to have a coherence in the two, how people perceive you and how you perceive yourself. Yes. But that's a matter of building a strong brand for yourself as a leader, right? So, if people perceive you the way you think you are, I think that then you typically have a strong brand, personal brand. Okay. And there is a report that does that. Mm-hmm. But essentially at the more foundational level, all assessments are self-assessments. Okay. The point I think that I like to highlight here, based on what you just said, is that remember that there are DiSC says that there are 4 styles or 4 dimensions.
Mhm.
Actually, there are 7.7 billion styles.
Of course.
Every person's unique.
Yeah.
Right. Because what creates your behavioral style is also your cognition, your knowledge, your experiences, your responsibilities in life, and all of that, right? And so every person's unique. What DiSC does is that it just clusters similar behaviors together. So it's a very broad categorization, and there would always be a million exceptions to that. What it does is that because you have 4 simple categories, it's easier to read people. It's easier to predict what kind of behaviors, you or someone else would perhaps demonstrate in certain situations. And so it makes the whole interpersonal context a bit easier to manage. But and it's a highly reliable and a valid report assessment, but that doesn't take away the fact that it's still a broad categorization.
And would you also say that the same questions, if I were to be answering in a different environment or a different situation down the line, my my placement on the DiSC circle would be different?
Unlikely.
Okay.
And that's because the assessment is a very robust assessment. It's a highly reliable assessment.
Okay.
So test retest is one way of measuring reliability of a tool.
Mhm.
And at least the assessment that you've taken is there's something called Cronbach alpha Lie coefficient, which is a measure of reliability of a tool, the psychometric tool.
Mhm.
And that's really high for this assessment.
Okay.
So it's unlikely that it would change unless you specifically wanted to, fool the assessment.
Yeah.
And in that case, of course, you can.
Got it.
Right. Yeah. All right.
Is there a way, I'm just thinking what Kavitha is talking about, where people see us differently sometimes. Is it that we're maybe not utilizing our predominant communication style regularly in our work? Is there something to that people don't see it because we're not exercising it or using it?
That could be one. We are flexing our style all the time. The way I'm sitting in front of you right now, I'm on a camera, is perhaps not the way I would sit in front of the TV on a couch, right? I'm adjusting my behavior to suit the situation. And that's what we would do all the time. It also depends on what frame of reference the other person's, looking at you or perceiving your style. If I'm a highly introverted person, then even if you are an ambivert person, someone who is a bit more extrovertish than I am, then I would look at you as being extrovert. However, if I'm someone who's very extrovertish, then I may look at you as an introvert. So it also depends on where the other person's coming from. And therefore, what we have to discuss is, and what we're really looking at is, what is the behavioral strength? Which means, which are the behaviors that you tend to use more often? Which are the behaviors that you fall back upon under stress? That's your style. All right, so how do we know which is your dominant hand? We observe you in writing in an exam, in a stressful situation. That's where you are unlikely to use your non-dominant hand, and that's what we know is your behavioral style. So, a trained eye would always look at behaviors under stress to really make a judgment of the person's style. Works, Sally? Great, thank you. All right, so what's DiSC model? DiSC model, says that there are 4 behavioral styles, which are broad categories. All styles are equally good. There is no best style. There is no socially desirable style. Sometimes some people may believe that there are some styles that work in our organizations and some styles don't, but it's not really about that. It's really about the fact is that all styles have certain strengths and all styles have certain limitations, and all styles can be effective. In fact, people are a blend of all the four styles. It's just that you use one style more often than the other, right? And that's typically what it is. Okay, so I want to ask you, what's the difference between what do you mean by motivation? How do you
something that prompts you to put the best version of yourself in anything that you do could be motivation. The prompter could be any external or internal influence or factor.
Right. Okay. So that's one way of looking at it, perhaps. Anjan, thanks. Anyone else?
I think motivation is something that moves you to action.
Okay. Action and moves you to act, right? To take action. Okay.
Yes.
Right. Now, based on, if you go back to the three things that actually create the behavioral style, what are those three factors that create a behavioral style? Physiology, cognition, and environment, right? It's an interplay of those three factors. Now, physiology is what it is, but the way Marston, the person who created the DiSC model, looked at, said, put cognition and environment together in those three factors, because they kind of play on each other. And if you were to look at just two kinds of environments, environment where you have more or less power than the environment, or you look at the whole axis of whether the environment is favorable or unfavorable. If you just plot what behaviors you would typically respond with in these environmental setups, you can actually see that people have different motivations. So this is just the theoretical aspect that Marston, who created the DiSC model, talked about, and he created it way back in 1928. A better way to look at the DiSC model is to say that people have, different motivations. They're more motivated towards something or away from something. You could be motivated towards something or away from something. However, if you were to cluster people based on what their primary motivations are or motives are, then you could, cluster them into four groups. There are some people who like to seek control. They like to be in control. When they are in control, they feel secure, they feel safe. There's some people who tend to have, of all the motivations that they have, the motive for social recognition is kind of the dominating motivation there. And when they get that attention and social recognition, they feel secure in a social setup. There are those who have a need for consistency and stability. They want to maintain status quo, and that's the steadiness style. And the fourth one's really about, quality and precision. When they are able to deliver quality and, work with precision, they feel secure. So at a very basic level, DiSC is really about four different types of motives. And by using those motives, we have clustered people or categorized people into four. People have all the four motivations. It's just that one motive is kind of more dominating than the other. Given this, I like to now ask you how you look at fear and stress differently. What's the difference between fear and stress?
Stress is something that gets created because of an influence from an environment on you. It could be any environment as such. Fear is more a psychological thing. So coming to your three branches that I'm trying to relate it to, Fear is more a psychological thing that's with an inner feeling and more to do with the person's emotion. It could be fear of anything for that matter, that could arise for a person from within. So that could be a difference between fear and stress. But again, it's hard to strike out an analogy because this could really be one perspective about it, but it could intertwine between each other as well. So sometimes a lot of fear can also lead to stress, and a lot of stress can also lead to fear, etc.
I'd like to add here, fear could be the inability to control a situation or environment, not have the tools to be able to get out of a situation, and that would lead to something that's called stress or different levels of stress.
Okay.
Could fears be a precursor to your action and stress a result of an action that you've created? I mean, so fears sometimes stop you from doing something, and stress could be, I'm just saying, could be a result of things you've done in the past, and that's causing you to stop doing something again. I don't know, just a thought.
Okay. Okay, I'll take that perspective. Anuba is saying stress can be good and bad. Good stress leads you to perform better by preparing better. Okay. All right, and Sally kind of agrees with that. Okay, any other difference between fear and stress?
Yeah, I think fear is more to something that prevents you from executing an action, whereas stress provides you a little discomfort in your action.
Okay. Okay. So all good points. I think, of course, these are again English words, and we can, interpret them the way it suits us. Fear is usually an internal thought. It's psychological, right? It's intrinsic, and it could be imaginary, it could be real. The most important thing about fear is that fear leads to a motivation, and I'm really talking at the theoretical level at the moment. So if you want to understand motives, if you want to understand motivation, it's better understood if you look at the fear behind it at a very basic level. So for example, if someone has a need for control, its need for control is best defined by the fear of exploitation, fear of being taken advantage of. Because I have a fear of being taken advantage of, I like to control things. I like to make sure that everything's in my control, and therefore no one can, exploit me or can take advantage of me. Similarly, need for or motivation for social recognition is best defined by saying that, the person has a fear of social rejection. If you have an enhanced fear of social rejection, then you're motivated to seek social attention and recognition because that assuages the fear. If you have a fear of conflict, then you want to make things, you don't want to change things. You want to keep things same. You want to make sure that everything is the way it is, because if things change, a conflict might break out, and therefore you like to keep things stable if you have a fear of conflict. And the fear and the motive for quality and precision is best defined by fear of criticism. If one has a fear of criticism, then you like to do things well. You like to go prepared for meetings because you wouldn't want to be criticized. Right? I'm just talking at the theoretical level. We all have all the fears. We all have all the motives. It's just that we might have some enhanced motives and some enhanced fears, right? Stress, on the other hand, is about environment. When you have a certain motive and your environment doesn't support that motive, then you get stressed. So fear leads to motive, and if that motive is not supported by your environment, you get stressed. So let's say that you have a fear of exploitation or being taken advantage of. Then you have a motivation, you are motivated to seek control. However, if you are in an environment where you don't have any control, there are just these policies and regulations that control everything. You don't have the freedom to act and do things your way, then you get stressed. Right? So the D style has a fear of being taken advantage of, has a motive of seeking control, and gets stressed when the environment doesn't give them the freedom to control things and do things their way. Similarly, for the I style or influence, the fear is of social rejection. The motive is of social recognition. And, you know, because you're a social butterfly, you like to shine in social groups and also make others shine in social groups. If you are put in a corner, if your environment is very boring, where you put in a corner and you have to work all alone, you don't get to interact with others, you can't express yourself, then you get stressed in that environment, right? S style. You have fear of conflict that leads you to drive stability, to maintain status quo. You know, can you all hear me? All right. Jill, hi. I just saw your message. You lost me.
Yeah, no, you just came back, but we lost like your last 30 seconds or so.
I
Or
was
at least
able to
I
hear
did.
him through the, yeah.
Yeah, I was able to hear.
Oh,
Yep,
then
I
must
thought
just
it was
be me.
on.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I thought it was only me, Jill. So even I lost the last 30 seconds.
Just like the last
Okay.
30 seconds. So you talked with influence that the fear
Right.
was of rejection, and then we started losing you.
All right.
True.
So let me just go back there. I'm sorry for that. So influence is about influence style. And remember that we're not talking about any one person. We're talking about 4 theoretical styles. And a person is a mix of all the 4 styles, right? So influence as a style is about the fear of rejection, which leads to a motive for seeking attention and social recognition. And if you are in an environment where your motive for social attention and recognition is not met, where you have to sit in one corner, work all alone, no social interactions, no opportunities to socialize and interact with people and shine, you would get stressed, right? So a stressful environment is a very structured, a social environment. You know, that's the stressful environment for the I style. For the S style, the fear is of conflict, which leads to a motive for maintaining status quo. And if you're in an environment where things are changing all the time, you know, changing deadlines, changing role, lack of clarity of role, things are not consistent, policies keep changing, goals keep changing, you're going to get stressed. So the S style gets stressed by fast changing environment, right? Perhaps a bookable. The C style, the fear is of criticism. Because there's a fear of criticism, you like to do things thoroughly, you like to do things one thing at a time and do it perfectly well. But if you are in an environment where you've got to keep jumping from one task to the other, can't dig deep, kind of spread wide, right? Then you get stressed because you don't get an opportunity to do what you like, which is to do things thoroughly, to do things well, you know, and do things right. So that's how you kind of link, that's how it's, you know, easy to link fears to motive and motive to stress, if that works, everyone. Okay, now another way to look at DiSC is to actually slice it across, you know, vertically and horizontally. So when you slice the DiSC circle horizontally, you see that D and I are actually perceiving themselves to be more powerful than the environment. They are driving the environment, and therefore they're more fast-paced. Remember again, when I'm saying you, etc., I'm not talking about any person, I'm talking about the model here, right? So D and I styles are more fast-paced. S and C styles are coping with the environment, and they're more slow-paced, more reflective. If you slice the circle vertically, then you would see that the G and C style are more questioning, more task-oriented. You have to get the job done, because the perception is that the environment is unfavorable. I and S are more accepting. They're more task-oriented, more feeling-oriented. So if I just put these two things together, I would see that the D style is task-oriented, fast-paced. Let's get the job done. Anyhow, process doesn't matter, outcome matters, result orientation. I style, fast-paced, feeling-oriented, people-oriented. Enthusiasm, energy, liveliness, those are some of the things that you would see in the I style. S style, slow-paced, moderately paced, people-oriented. Let's take everyone along. Let's build consensus. Let's support each other. Create an environment that's friendly and that respects everyone, that listens to everyone. That's an S style. C style, task-oriented, slow-paced. Let's do one thing at a time. Plan all the way before starting any new task. Do it thoroughly. Get into details, analyze, and then take one step at a time. That's the C style, right? Based on this, you could actually look at certain behavioral labels for each of these styles. These are the behavioral strengths of each of these styles. The D style has high ego strength, strong will, decisive, efficient. You can see there's high pace and there is task orientation. I style is emotional, optimistic, animated, people-oriented, enthusiastic. That's the behavioral strength of the I style. The S style is dependable, supportive, people-oriented, slow-paced, contented, agreeable, accepts change slowly, calm, reserved. Those are some of the behavioral strengths of the S style. And the C style is a perfectionist, serious demeanor, sensitive, perfectionist, etc. If these are the behavioral strengths of the four styles, what would be their behavioral challenges? What's the difference between behavioral strength and skill strength?
Do we have challenges first, or do we want to define behavioral strength and skill strength?
Yeah, let's define this latter first. Yeah, behavioral strengths and skill strengths.
I think, like we've been speaking, Akash, from quite some time in the session. So when you look at behavioral strength, it's an ability for a person to say, portray his emotions or his persona in a particular manner in any situation. Could be a behavioral strength for even with an example. So if someone is very confident in his approach, then that could, and a setting, an environment that he requires to be in requires him to exuberate that confidence. That could be a behavioral strength for that person. Now, versus a skill strength could be one where a person, yes, he has a behavioral trait of being confident, but the person knows what he's doing and what he's supposed to do in terms of, it could be maybe like operating a machine, or it could be a sales guy who knows end to end of his product. That could be a skill that he's built over a period of time and could be a skill strength. Just an analogy. I mean, there could be 1,000 ways to look at this, but maybe one particular that could differentiate the two, in my opinion.
Yeah. I'll probably just give another example. I think if you're looking to solve a problem and you need the person who believes that they can solve a problem, right? So that belief is their behavioral strength. And of course, if there's a particular missionary, the person needs to know more about that missionary, or needs to have the skill to be able to solve that particular problems, right? So if I have just the confidence to be able to solve a problem, and I'm an engineer and I must to solve a medical problem, that's not going to work. I need to have the skills in engineering to solve an engineering problem.
Yeah. Is this a good reminder? So skill strength is consistent high performance, right? If I'm able to cycle faster than everyone else here, every time you put me in the stadium on the same track with everyone else with the same bicycle, if I come first, I'm, perhaps cycling is my strength. Behavioral strength is the behaviors that you tend to use more often. So if you are a talkative person, then talkativeness is your strength. Your reliance on talkativeness is somewhat more, and therefore that's your strength, right? Is everyone okay with this? This was a slide that we discussed yesterday, and perhaps we started the conversation with this today, right? And if I go back here now, I see that these are the behavioral labels or behavioral strengths of each of the styles. What are their challenges? What are their weaknesses? The challenges or weaknesses are that they might overuse these, especially in times of stress. And that becomes a problem. Talkativeness is my strength. And when I get stressed, I talk even more. I go to a serious board meeting and I start talking there. And that becomes a weakness. So here are the words that describe the behavioral challenges of the, each side. It's not what you don't do, it's what you overdo. That's the observable part of the behavior. So just putting it together, behavioral strengths and behavioral challenges are two sides of the same coin. In skills, what you don't know is your weakness, or what you don't do well is your weakness. In behaviors, overdoing your strengths is your weakness, right? And that's the difference between skills and behaviors that we were discussing. So the D style, while their strength is ego strength, decisiveness, etc. The weakness is that they may make decisions too quickly without really weighing the pros and cons of the decision. They may bulldoze through situations. Then they may not involve people because they're fast-paced and task-oriented. Similarly, the I style is enthusiastic and optimistic. They may fail to structure things properly or be thorough in their implementations. The S style may be so supportive that they're not able to take some unpopular decisions. And maybe take, for example, getting people over the weekend to the office may be a very difficult task for the S style because of their supportive behavioral priority. Similarly, for the C style, while they're perfectionists, they may have analysis paralysis if they don't have enough data. They may overanalyze and may not consider how people are feeling in a certain situation when making a decision. They may make a decision solely on the data or analysis that they may do, right? And that's the difference, in the four styles. Are you able to link it to strengths? Are you seeing that the four styles have certain challenges and these are really an overplay of their strengths? Any questions or reflections? I really wanted to arrive at this slide and not kind of just give you this slide so we know how, strengths and challenges are kind of related.
Akash, just some clarity required. We often view others by our own parameters, our own strengths. It's always pitting someone as we see ourselves, from a larger psychological view, how you seek certain people of a certain language or a region and so on. So would your strength, let's say if I am a D, conversation's sake, would I also seek people who are Ds? Or if they are not like me, I have a different perception of them. Would that also be a way for us to identify our own strengths as a D? Saying, wanting to see this in others could also be a weakness in us?
Okay, let me see if anyone in the group has an opinion about that.
It's debatable, to be honest. So, it again then gets into a character or nature of a person, probably, Kavita. It does not come into maybe a behavior or a skill trait that we can attribute it to from that scenario.
Yeah, I have seen this behavior, like especially in interviews, that you typically, a person who is of a certain type will try and relate more, or will relate better to a person who is similar to them, right? And that's been proven time and again. So maybe it has an impact, and that's what we call as unconscious bias, right? But if you're aware of it, then you might be able to stay away and not make that mistake.
Yeah,
There's
I think I
also
relate
the-
that to, sorry.
No, go
Yeah.
ahead, Damien.
Go on, Lily. So I thought it was also being very judgmental about your opinions of others. Yes.
I was
All
just going to say that I think there's that what you were talking about, Royden, kind of that attraction to like, but then there's also this I've experienced it and I've seen it, where someone who really gets under your skin and bothers you is often exhibiting the thing in you that bothers you. So if you're in conflict, for instance, if you are in conflict with this D and you're seeing them as the words that are not necessarily the positive words, like the pushy, impatient, domineering. And it's like, then it's like, if you did some self-reflection, is that part of you? Is that, you know what I mean? So I'm taking us maybe in a different direction, Akash, but as we were talking through this and being attracted, I can also think of times when I'm like at odds with someone and maybe they're exhibiting the things I don't like with me.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other perspective?
I also think sometimes we may be attracted toward another one, like in friendships, for example. I have friends that balance me out because they're on the opposite end of the spectrum, and I know I need them. My spouse is across the diagram from me. My best friend is across the diagram from me because they help balance my crazy.
Right. So what behavioral science seems to be saying is that we are more likely to strike a rapport with people who are like us. But that doesn't mean that we're more effective with people, working with people who are like us. All right. And also that doesn't mean that we cannot have high trust, long-term relationships with people of the other types. We're just saying that, when you meet someone who has a similar style as yours, it's easier to strike a rapport. It's easier to build that rapport. But that's just the first time, right? Relationships and trust is a completely different ballgame. So I would look at rapport differently, and I would look at relationships differently. And I would look at effectiveness differently. Being effective as a team is a different thing altogether. Yeah. Is that okay? Does that answer your question, Kavita? All right, great. Okay, so would you all like to see some videos where I could actually show you some styles in action? And let's see if based on the orientation, which is task or people orientation or fast and slow paced, and your knowledge of the motives, you are able to actually identify the styles. Yeah, let's put some, realism to our conversations, and then, we would play a game after that. Allow me a moment and I'll share my screen. I'm always very wary of videos in an online session. Sometimes they just don't work. Okay. I hope you all can see my screen.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to play some videos, and I'm going to pause after each video and, and have a conversation about which style do you think that person is. So, a moment, just. Sorry.
I've been over this marketing report 3 times now, and I still don't know what it says. There's no substance. I can't use it, and I don't have time for it. I'm a sales manager. It's my job to get product out the door. It's hard work, and I enjoy the challenge, and there's always something new. My associates think I'm a control freak. We joke about it. But let me tell you, in my line of work, you've got to stay on top of things if you want results. So I'm going to call marketing and tell them to send me some information I can use.
All right, what style do you think was that?
D.
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 All right.
D,
Why,
yeah, D.
why do you say so?
Yeah, D.
She was results oriented and wanted to do everything she could in her power to, go for what she really wanted. And yeah.
No time for the fluff, just get to the results, get
Yeah.
into action.
Right. High paced, therefore.
Mhm.
Any other word that you heard which might point towards the D style?
Controlling.
She said, I don't have time for this.
Yeah, I don't have time for this.
I don't have time to go through the entire manual. I want something that I can read quickly and get to. All right. Let's look at Eric.
I've got a budget meeting with my manager this morning. A pre-budget meeting, actually, where we talk about our plans before we meet to finalize the numbers. Everyone on team gets a chance to share ideas. Very productive. It wasn't always that way, and we had a good reason to change things. Before this new approach, budget meetings were open warfare. I seem to spend most of my time calming people down. Things are better now. I feel that building relationships is very important, the glue that holds everything together. It creates stability. That's how you get results. Say, can I pour you a cup of coffee?
All right.
I thought S.
Yeah, I thought S.
Between
Even I thought
Yeah,
S.
S.
S, tending towards S a little.
Okay, I see quite a lot of S's there on the chat. People-oriented, supportive, gel. All right. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. A bit more explanation. So, I see a couple of people have said I. Let's start with that. Why do you think it's an I style?
I, because it's more about the people and the influence he has in controlling the conversation. There was no mention about the ideas of, what the budget was about. It's more about people. So that's why I put it as I.
So did I.
Okay. And how do you think is the I style different from the S style?
Okay.
He is more social.
Mhm.
He avoids rejection, and influencing is their style. So they fall into a pattern. He is amicable with things out there. So that's his characteristics.
Okay. Anyone who would like to talk about the S style? If you've chosen the S style, why do you think it was the S style?
I think his preference for calmness. He used the word, things are calm now. And I think one thing that caught my attention was right at the end when he said, I'll pour you a cup of coffee as well. I mean, that was just something that added to it. I wouldn't say the only thing, but those were two things that struck out for me.
Okay.
Stood out.
Supportive,
Yeah.
supportive from the word go, I think could be one that attributed a lot to the S. And he looked pretty sorted in terms of his thoughts and process. So steadiness could kind of be seen a lot.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank you.
I think the fact that he wanted change, he was not very comfortable with the earlier forms of meeting, where it would have been argumentative or in conflict. And I think he wanted a steady but a slow change, and that is a characteristic of the S.
I echo Munir.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks for the reminder. You could also see that the person's just more organized and, seems to be organizing things and has a slower, even pace of speaking. Those are some, of course, these are exaggerations. People are a mix of all the four styles, but I think it helps us, understand the four styles. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is I would like to get you into a group and give you 3 questions to mull over. So we'll have 3 groups now. And each group would have 1 question. When we come back, after this exercise, we will also, play a game of cards. But that's later. Let's look at these 3 questions. I have 3 questions. We're going to make 3 groups. You're going to get about 20 minutes to discuss these questions in your groups and come back. So the first is that if you were to select a surgeon for a critical surgery or a high-stake project of an year in year 1, which style would you choose and why? Which style would be better? Team 2, what's the best time to observe and identify a person's DiSC style? How would you go about it? Team 3, if you were creating a team of 12 rocket scientists for planning the next rocket launch, what would be your preference in terms of the DiSC styles, the team members? How many Ds, how many Is, how many S, and how many Cs? Just assuming that all their other characteristics like skills, education, etc. are the same. These are the 3 questions. I'd like you to mull over these questions in your breakout rooms for 20 minutes and come back and present. It'll be good if you have a slide, if you like. That would help us, put some structure to the response to the conversations. Okay, so I do see a question. I'm sorry. Do you have any other, maybe just one more examples of the dominant styles, please? Munira, could you help me understand your question? I'll be happy to give you more examples.
Oh, no, I was hoping that we could discuss this before you presented the slide. But since we've moved ahead, that's fine. In case you're able to share
You
any
wanted
other
to see the videos, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, I will go back to those videos.
Sure.
Multiple times.
Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so we have the groups ready now. We have 3 groups and 3 questions. If everyone's okay with this, please do take a screenshot if you like of this slide so that you know what your question is. Team 1, room 1, you just look at question 1. Room 2, look at question 2, and room 3, look at question 3. Right, so it's just 1 question per team. I'm opening the rooms now. Jill and Anuba, right? Hi, Royden.
Sorry, I was saying I accidentally clicked the leave button. So I was just reading the pop-up message that came and I clicked leave.
All right.
Anyway, we didn't.
Are you enjoying the sessions, Royden?
Oh yeah, I'm enjoying it. Anyway, I don't think our team was able to reach a consensus, at least as long as I was there, we were not, we didn't reach a consensus. So.
You were in team 1, okay.
Team 1, yeah. Tough one, right? Especially because it's a medical scenario.
Right, right. All right.
We got very excited about the countdown to come back to the room. It's like, blast off!
Oh, yes.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Let's begin. Team 1, would you like to go first?
Sure. I'm going to start speaking for our group, and then the rest of the group.
Do you have a slide to
and
present?
Kavi
Shall I take
will
off my
jump
slide?
in. What's that?
Do you have a slide to present? Shall I take off my
Oh,
slide?
no, we don't have a slide.
All right. Let me just
we all
take
missed that direction. Sorry.
Okay.
But we had a very robust conversation. We started down the path of talking about a surgeon, and we each had some definite opinions about that. And then Roy turned us into thinking about it from a project perspective. And ultimately, we found value in, so thinking about it from a high stakes project perspective, we found value in kind of taking that, if you look at the results of your own DiSC and where you fall in that circle, kind of moving that black dot close to the center so that, I don't know if they would necessarily all be equal, but we felt very strongly about the SC with DI components as well. So others, you want to chime in?
Thanks, Lindy. I think I'll go first, and then maybe Roy and Kavi can jump in. So the example that we were given is it's a very critical operation of a very near and dear one, and what style of what would be the chosen or preferred style for the doctor who would be performing the surgery. So we had a good discussion. We tilted towards D, somebody who is very practical, independent, motivated, and who would perform the surgery, right? But of course, we also thought about the emotional aspect, right? Somebody who would be calm and perform the surgery, but also give good updates and ensure that things are less stressed, because it would be highly stressful for the family member, right? So that's the example we took. But if we took a look at it from a project perspective, then Roy had a suggestion, and his opinion was he would want more partners or more individuals on his team who would demonstrate the S style or the personality style. The other opinions were that if it is a high stakes project, you would want people from different personalities. Someone with the D, with the I, with the S, and with C's, who would be a diverse team, and everybody would have different viewpoints and perspectives. And that would be a good way to look at it, apart from the operation that is being performed in the hospital, right? So these are some of the conversations we've had. Kavi has another view as well, which she will share. But this is something that we spoke on, a very good discussion on this example.
Okay, Akash, it's, we had a two-view approach to this, one very individual. If I were to choose a surgeon, if Kavita was to do it, it would be a D style, right? Now you put us in a room and you got us into a conversation. Now, all four of us have to trash it out and come to a decision. All of us may not agree completely, but we would sort of support the final agreed style. So what we chose was a curve which had a predominant bucketing with C and S, with some of the dominating style and some of the I style. So that's where the curve was. So left to me, I want a complete D, but my team wants this. So the different views are based on the discussion, individual and collective.
And thanks. And Akash, just to add, we also spoke of the company culture, right? So what is the culture of the company? Is it D, is it I, is it S, or is it C?
Yeah. And it was interesting because when Munira was actually describing a D type of company, the thought that came to my mind was Goldman Sachs, like very clearly, right? So I'm not going to talk about Northern Trust. I know it's getting recorded, so I'll be a little careful. Right, yeah, I think it doesn't really apply only to people. It's also behaviors, right? So if a particular group of people demonstrate a set of behaviors, that can also be categorized in one of these buckets. So that was my eureka moment.
Okay, let me open this up for others. Would anyone else have an opinion about this?
Well, I was thinking about it as they were talking about a surgeon, and I was even thinking back to an experience I had. Like, if I need a surgeon, that's a medical task-oriented type of brain with precision and perfection, and I want it done right. And if they aren't the most people, I've had that. I've had a good surgeon, and then post whatever, all the post stuff that he needed to do, he was not good, and I switched to my primary doctor, right? It's like, I don't necessarily need the people person to do the surgery. So if we're talking about a surgeon, then I want perfection by somebody that, thinks like task oriented more than people oriented. That was my initial thought on that.
So we actually discussed this part, and to make things easier for us, we said, let's assume that because these guys are surgeons, right? They would have practiced a lot. So we said, let's keep the skills part of performing the surgery equal. So that was
and
an
that was
assumption
a good
that we made.
discussion to have, isn't it? Because right at the outset, we said we should not use DiSC for selection. And so this was a bit of a trick question. I would just go with the surgeon who's skilled and reputed, and I wouldn't bother about his or her DiSC style. That's not the right application of DiSC, right? Because ultimately what you're doing is you are selecting a person based on DiSC, which is not the right application of DiSC. All styles can be equally effective. People don't do a DiSC assessment before becoming a surgeon, and all of them could be good surgeons, because they're practiced surgeons. They understand, they have the knowledge and the skills and the expertise to be a good surgeon. So I would just go with the, expertise and reputation as opposed to the DiSC styles.
Talk about a googly.
Would that be okay?
Well, that makes sense to me, but I guess my thinking is kind of going back to what we talked about earlier today and yesterday, that talent and skills, like, I believe there are certain styles that probably tend to gravitate more toward that because they have a natural bent for, the science, the perfectionism, the whatever. Whereas you may have medical people on the people-oriented side that might rather go towards physical therapy or pediatrics or something different than surgery, because it's kind of two different types of things.
Yeah, you're right, Sally, because there isn't a very strong connection between roles and DiSC styles. But of course, there is a connection between, you know, what people could gravitate towards. I remember doing a DiSC session for one of the big fours. You know, this was a accounting team. So they're all chartered accountants sitting in the room, 45 of them actually. And the leader of the group was the I style. But we also found that more than 60% of the people were of the C style. Now, how are they of the C style? Is there something in the recruitment process that, you know, makes it easier for those in the C style to get in, or do people with the C style naturally gravitate towards something like chartered accountancy, you know, etc.? Difficult to say. But I think the point that I'm really trying to make is that we've got to be careful about applying a behavioral tool because all we get is a pattern. All we know is what comes easily to the person. It's not really about abilities. It's about preferences. You could pretty much have an I-style surgeon, you know, who's a very lively surgeon, and maybe you really need someone lively in the operation theater, you know, because you have a stressful surgery to make things better. And that doesn't really take away the skill that person might have. The skill of surgery might, you know, still be an awesome skill for that person to possess. You know, so we just have to be careful about that.
I think, Akash, over here, the assumption we are making is that all the surgeons would have the same skill and the same talent. But what if the style, their personality is different? Then who would you choose?
Then what you would choose is, then what you need to be aware about is that each style would have certain strengths and challenges. If I have a D style in the operation theater, the surgeon might make some quick decisions without properly weighing the pros and cons of those decisions. The C style may not be able to make a decision because there is not enough data to support them. The I style might make an impulsive decision and not really plan the entire surgery. And the S style may find it difficult to change their approach, you know, midway in the surgery, even if they found something new that should make them change their approach. So all styles would have some challenges, and what really matters is how do you help them adapt their style? How do you support their style or complement their you know, style in a way that you have a better decision coming out in the operation theater?
Sure, thank you. I think the best example would be going to your favorite dentist.
Right.
You have a favorite dentist, Munira?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. Any more questions on this one? All right, thank you. Let's go to room 2 then.
All right, so let me share screen. Let me know if all of you are able to see a presentation that we tried to put together. So the question that we had was the right time to identify a DiSC style. And when we were discussing this, we all agreed that it's mostly during a stressful or pressure-driven situation that you really are able to identify a DiSC style. An example that we could illustrate would be in terms of when an individual is moving, say, from an individual role to an initial leadership role. So there could be quite a lot of stress and pressure when you make that trajectory move in a career. So it could be a right moment for a person to identify a DiSC style, because it could also earmark and change his journey and trajectory from there. That's how we felt of how we should say could be a right time possibly to identify a DiSC style. How do we do it? Two approaches. One was through gamification. We all know it's always fun when you are into a simulation environment where you have all of people with different styles put into the same situation, controlled environment, of course, but then it helps people to understand how they react to a situation and understand their style better. Maybe have a team of observers who would help these individuals to debrief and assess each of their styles is an approach one. Approach two is maybe more self-paced, so have an observation checklist to determine an individual's behavioral style. Also assess an individual in a group setting in terms of observing them. Maybe a 360-degree observation could also give help to have a person assess and know his style. And of course, resource, we wanted to be kind to you, Akash, so we'll also take the self-assessment in terms of when we wish to and identify what our styles are, which we did before we came to this session. That's what we had from a group, but I'll pause for a second, then have Anuba, Jill, and Lisa to see if they have anything else to add that we had as a group, and otherwise we can discuss further.
One thing I would add is we agreed that under stress, that style will become more obvious, but that's not always practical to put someone in a stressful situation. So just some simple observation. We talked about observing a person in a group setting. What are their tendencies? In a team meeting, are they the one who's always volunteering information, or are they the one taking the notes? Or just some indicators of what some dominant behaviors might be. So there's multiple opportunities to at least get an idea of what that person's style might be.
I had a question for this group. Why only stressful or pressure situation when someone is unguarded, or when someone is without inhibitions, their true self? Why not this style identification then? Because you, as you say, you caught them off guard, so that may probably bring out their true nature, whereas in pressure you are probably wanting to perform, wanting to give the right answer, if I may say. So why not identify in an unguarded, stress-free environment? Why only stress or pressure?
So we did talk about this.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Anuba. Go ahead.
Please go ahead, Anjan. I'll add to it.
No, I was just saying we did talk about this, Kavita, as a group, and we were discussing. So it's only from a thought to say that when a person has very less time to react in any situation, where they know for a fact that they don't have very limited time, a true color of a person comes up in terms of what their innate character is. And the whole idea of a DiSC style is to identify an individual unique to himself or herself. So hence we attributed that when you are at the edge of your seat, in such a moment, or it could not necessarily be a stress or pressure, like Lisa mentioned. It cannot be coined in stone that it's the only way to identify a DiSC style, but it's one of the most common ways where a DiSC style is evidently noticeable as such. So that's more where we're coming from. So we're not saying as a group that this is the only way that we can identify a DiSC style. To your point, there could be a lot of other ways, and hence why in our approaches, if you see, if a person's taking a survey, it's always not necessary that he's in pressure to take the survey. So there's a lot of time available for the person to reflect himself as well. But in a sense, if you see, a behavioral style or a DiSC style can be easily identified when it's an edge of the seat moment, ideally say. So it's more of the identification aspect kind of coming through.
In fact, we were asked to take the DiSC assessment in a relaxed, unhurried manner. So how would pressure and unhurried be the same?
It's more in terms of go ahead, Anuba, maybe you can add on.
Yeah, I'll take a shot. So thank you, Kavita, for asking this question. I think very interesting question. A very simple answer to this is the question said, when is the best time? So the best made us thinking that, of course, because we're talking about behavioral strengths and we're talking about the neuroscience of it. So basically, when you are in a challenging situation, your most hardwired neural networks sort of gets activated or reactivated. So which means that this is the best time for you to observe the dominant strengths, so to speak, that we were referring to. So from the neuroscience perspective is what we thought of this, also because the question made us think in that direction. But we also added to it saying that we should not limit our observation to just the challenging situations, but overall per se. There was a little bit of discussion around self-assessment. And my question there was, are we accounting for recency bias as well? So for example, if I was taking the self-assessment and I was marking my behaviors, at any point of time, I'm just kind of going back in time that was there a possibility that I did that behavior, displayed that behavior very recently, so I would have marked it to be true in a particular spectrum, and that could have created a little bit of error. So how is that going to get accounted in my reports? How much of variation will that reflect in my reports? So that was more of a question that we reflected on. But to your question of observing these behaviors, for sure, the challenging environment and otherwise, but the best time, going back to the science and neuroscience, the neural networks and hardwired neural networks.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Anyone has any other view about this? Okay. So we're talking about DiSC, which measures, which provides a pattern for observable behaviors. Behaviors that you tend to use more often. What that means is that if the behavior becomes more observable, it's easy to identify the DiSC style. And that is why we said that if we observe someone under stress, their behavioral style they're unlikely to flex or adapt their style in that situation, because we tend to, rely on our behavioral strengths under stress. We tend to go back to our strengths under stress. And therefore, we are likely to observe behaviors which are related to their behavioral strengths. So if we need to observe someone and identify their behavioral strengths, stress or conflict is a good moment for us to observe. However, not a very healthy thing to really practice, right? Observing people in conflict. And so if in general you want to observe people and identify their style, go with the two-step process. The first step, identify the pace of the behavior. Are they high-paced, fast-paced, or are they slow-paced? Second, are they people-oriented or task-oriented? Now, pace is a very easy thing to observe, right, usually. So you should be able to observe that. Now, if you know that they're fast-paced, then you know that it's either D or I style. And if you know that it's a slow-paced, it's either C or S style. And then the second step would be to actually observe, whether they're more focused on task or people and feelings. That may take some time, but that would be the, right method to go about by. The third thing that Kavita asked was about the fact that when you're unguarded, right? And that's a fantastic question, because one of the questions is, or one of the pertinent questions to answer is, does our DiSC style change between work and home? Do you think we're different at workplace? Do you are different at home? Or with people we know well?
We are versions of ourselves in different places, if I can say that.
All right.
So I'm a version of a C at office, and I'm a version
So
of
is there like a neural network that switches on only at workplace and then switches off when you're at work? at home? Do we have different compartments in our brain for work and home?
No, it's the same person, both at work and at home. There's no difference. But I'm thinking we're more guarded at work because I guess we are always under the microscope. At home, less so. So we would be a tad different in the two environments. Same person, but a little different, yes.
That's what I was going to say. And I think sometimes we're more conscious of overcoming the negatives of our style at work. So we put forth the energy and the effort to do that in the workplace so that when we get home, we relax into our natural tendencies, and maybe some more of the negative side of those tendencies come out because we've sort of expended energy throughout the day to be the best version of our type in the office. And so our family might not get the best version of our type when we get home.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, the stakes are different. At work, we're, getting paid and being reviewed and getting, feedback and all those things. And it's at home, it's kind of like, this is what you get, babe.
Yeah, I was going to say that I play very different roles between work and home. Therefore, my style is different between work and home. I'm still me, but I'm using very different behaviors in the two places. So my family has often said when they overhear me on a work call, they're like, wow, you sound really smart or something like that. It's like, okay. But yeah, I'm using different skills and behaviors in the workplace than I do in my natural element at home.
I find it that there are behaviors that I demonstrate at work, but I also demonstrate with my friends and with my family. And so it's interesting that it holds true. It's not like a different version. There are maybe, I don't know, I can see it. I see the patterns in my interactions and dynamics with my friends or in my interactions with my colleagues. I'd be like, hey, what's up? You can really see. It's the same thing even with my parents. Hey, mom, how's it going? Same thing with my friends. And so there are those characteristics, I guess, that are consistent in all my interactions, work, at home, with friends. So that's kind of the experience for me.
Yeah. So I think all of you are right. I think what we're really saying is that our styles don't really change between work and home. What changes is the degree of adaptability. We adapt to our environment a lot more when the environment is unfamiliar or is a bit more formal, like at the workplace, and there are high stakes. Whereas when we're at home, we are a bit unguarded. We tend to be less adaptable. We tend to flex less. And therefore we are more like ourselves at home. And that actually brings us to the best time to observe someone's style, which would be in conflict at home, because that's when you are really unguarded and you're actually overusing your style. So, of course, it's not practical or healthy to observe people at home in conflict, but that's but technically, yes, that would be the best moment. All right. Great. Thank you. Let's go to team 3 then.
I'll share my screen. I think Sally, Urzi, or Damien can just jump right into sharing this. Hang on. Share my screen real quick. Did you want to?
I can start briefly and then I'll let the others chime in. So we had a hard time coming up with a team of 12. We had everybody figured out and they were like, oh, wait, that's 15. So we wanted more people on our launch team than we were allowed. And so we had to kind of juggle that quite a bit. What we ended up, as you can see with the yellow and the green, is that 2/3 of the team was of the task orientation side of the spectrum, and 4 of them were on the people oriented. Because of it being a very technical, detailed, you've got to have perfection, precision, and order, or you don't want to put astronauts in a capsule. So that's why there's 2/3 of the team tends toward the D and I mean the D and C. So I'll let somebody else talk to the rest of the detail we have there.
So I can go next. Thanks, Sally, and thanks, Matt. I think one of the other things we did in determining, these styles and how many people we'd want is also looking at the other spectrum. We looked at both what would work in an non-stressful environment for these, as well as, if they were challenged, right? What would be certain characteristics that would come up? And we took those into account as well, because it's not going to be all roses on this whole expedition. There could be some challenges. So we wanted, that's why, with certain things you'll find even on the screen, there's, for the C's we found critical, and for the D's we found pushy. These were put as the, more negative things as characteristics for these styles, as what we had on that chart. So we thought that even though, these weren't what someone would call ideal in this situation, we might feel that, given that this is such a high risk thing, there may be certain of these other spectrum side of things that might also help. So that was another thing that we considered when we were talking about both the good and what might seem not so good, but actually quite suitable to the situation to come in. So that's the combination we took in with bringing in your C's and D's. And of course, we tried to balance in with a few people there to, be there to bring the team together, that optimism and the teamwork. So that's why we gave in some number, at least, to the I's and the S's. But yeah, that was what we were thinking of. Damien, do you want to add anything else too?
I think you've done all that, Zadia. Yes, we've just got a combination of all attributes for this mission.
Yeah, go team. I think also that clearly what we were anticipating with this kind of also the environment is the dynamic, the human, the human aspect of it, because it's skill, right? They're supposed to have equal skills, education level. And so, pretty much they know their craft and their science behind it. But I think what was really driving it also was, this is the environment and what will be the dynamics, the human dynamics, the interactions that we're anticipating in this kind of an environment. And so that's why, to Z's point, there are items here that might be seen as a negative thing, but actually to be of an advantage, given that this possibly could be the dynamic in this situation. So, yeah.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks. Okay, so I still want to kind of reiterate and reinforce the fact that all styles are equally good. And best decisions come out when you have a diverse group. I'd like you to think about one thing, the stress threshold for a person. Now, while we do know that the C style would get stressed if they have to do multiple things at the same time, because they like to do one thing at a time and do it thoroughly, we do know that a fast-changing environment would be stressful for S. Working, when there's a lot of demand for details, the I would get stressed, and D would get stressed in a environment, in a standstill environment, in an environment where there is nothing much to do, or there are a whole lot of policies and regulations to, control things. But how much stress one can take, and before really overusing their style or really demonstrating over reliance on their style, is an individual trait. Okay, so it's my when my daughter gets goes for her vaccine, she doesn't bother one bit. She can just get an injection and come back. But when my wife goes for that vaccine, even the guard outside the hospital would know that somebody's getting an injection. Her response to a injection is very, very different. So how much stress can you take as an individual trait? Now, imagine that you have the C styles, which is what you have put the maximum weightage on. But you have individuals who have very low threshold for stress. It's not going to work.
Well, okay,
right?
so I
And
see what you're
so-
saying, but I have a point on that. And I think it's because you have to give them a silo of a task that needs to be done. So you potentially need more of them, each doing a very detailed thing and not trying to have too many screens and too many things to potentially lessen that stress, but still have the accuracy that you need for the task. I'm just playing devil's advocate.
What if you have to make decisions very quickly with very less data?
But that's where you have the Ds.
Right. And what if you should really get and listen to everyone's point of view and then make a decision? The S would be perhaps better at it, because D may not have the patience to listen to everyone.
True.
And I may not have the patience to look at data, but really go in an impulsive, intuitive way. The point is that you need all the styles, right? And it's difficult to say how many of each style. In fact, most of the times as managers and leaders, you don't get to decide how many of which style you would like to have on your team. What really happens is practically that you inherit a team. And you need to make the best out of that team. And so what we need to learn is how to work with different styles and how to ensure that all styles are included in decision making, because they all get different things to the table. And that's the point here, that even though the skills and knowledge and everything is, equal among all the players, I would just go with very high level, say, okay, maybe 4 Ds and 4 Is and 4 S, or 3 of each style. That's okay, because what matters in behaviors is how flexible and adaptable you are. Doesn't matter what your natural style is, what your home style is. What matters is how flexible you are. And so let's say you have an I style who's very flexible and is able to use C style when they need to make decisions that require data, and F style when they need to take people along. That's a far better team member to have than someone who's got a C style and just can't flex. So it's the level of flexibility that defines behavioral effectiveness and not the home style. I'm not saying that your answer was wrong. I'm just saying that we should just guard against being judgmental about various styles here. And all styles are equally important. Okay, I hope that works. Any questions, anyone? Great. I'm not really going to bug you with any more hard content. I know that we are towards the end of the session. We're going to pick up new content tomorrow. We're going to, start with some maybe videos and play a game. What I like to do in the 20 minutes that we have left is really to get you into the groups and do a quick recap so that you can kind of, link the dots and make sure that you have your insights well ingrained. So let's get into, if it is okay, the same groups again, the 3 groups that I'm going to recreate the groups actually. I've recreated the groups. I'm going to give you 12 minutes in the group. to go through today's session, look at what insights you've had today, some things that you're taking away, come back and discuss it, in the main session. Okay, everyone, your highlights, your key takeaways. If you have any emerging questions, please do mention them as well. And I'd be happy to know, how you're finding the sessions. How is it going for you? That'd be a good thing to know once you come back. So please join your breakout groups. Welcome back.
Thank you.
We have two groups coming back in a couple of seconds.
So everybody's moving now. In my room, everybody was frozen, but now that we're all back in the main room, where everything's moving again.
Okay. All right, group two is back as well. And there's group three. Welcome back. Let's begin. Let's connect the dots. I'd like to go with group one. Group one, how's it going for you? What are some of the key insights that you exchanged or heard of in your room?
We've forgotten our groups as well. What was our group number?
So Anuba, Damon, Lindy, and Sally.
Well, the first thing our group said, DiSC is not a selection tool.
Yeah,
That was
go on,
like-
Sally, sorry.
No, that's fine. That's the first takeaway. Somebody else take it from here.
Yes, so we kind of discussed about the different scenarios or situations where different behavioral patterns can be applied. And we'll need to be adaptable, flexible to be changing. So there isn't a consistent pattern is what we were discussing about. And we also discussed about identifying how we're going to use this in our daily lives. So how do we measure our partners? How do we evaluate the behavioral patterns? And we are kind of looking forward to day 3 and 4 to see what more is in store to bring about this behavioral pattern in our partners. So that's one, and over to Anu.
Hi. Yeah, so we were also talking about how each style is very effective and none of the styles we can label as good style or a bad style. In a nutshell, we should be able to adapt to different styles given the situations and circumstances. So that's the kind of takeaway. Yeah.
And then I'll just close it out that we were also very excited about learning how to present this kind of information to the people that we work with, to our partners, because there is this idea about no one's better than the other, yet we'll know that there is probably an attitude of there's one that I should be aspiring to be. And so, knowing how to do that and do that well, we're all very interested in.
All right. Yeah. Understandable. Thank you so much, everyone. Okay, room 2. Jill, Lisa, Matt, and Royden.
I'll jump in. One thing that our group talked about is that there's a lot of variance in each situation. You have to be able to remain flexible and observant to react appropriately. You can't just stay locked in your comfortable style. And that different people have different thresholds for stress, and that's going to affect them. So there's just a lot of moving parts, I guess is the best way to say it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You also spoke about the neuroscience and the application of DiSC and what to apply it and what not to apply it to. So, and I think group A covered quite a bit, so I'm not going to repeat that.
All right.
Yeah, and Akash, we're also talking about mimicking or learning from your delivery style in this, right? And I think Lindy was just alluding to that a little bit, how you take us on the journey, how you ask the questions, how you don't say no per se, but you kind of, there's a mastery that you have in delivering this and how you articulate it that I'm finding very valuable as well.
Thank you so much, Jill. Thank you. Jill, by the way, did you see the link for yesterday's session in the chat? It did
Lisa
get
sent
you.
it to me because when I came in, it was already, I can't get to the chat that I wasn't there for, but Lisa gave it to me. So thank you. I'm going to try to catch up. And I know that at least 1 or 2 of our other partners are really going to be relying on the videos too. So I don't know if they'll be mailed to us, but that would be nice.
Okay. All right, we'll do that. Thank you. Room 3. Kavita, Munira, and Zinnia.
Sure, thanks, Akash. So I think neuroscience was something that I needed more information on. I think this helped. But we did speak on strengths, motivations, what are fears, right? What styles are our dominant styles in times of stress. But of course, the googly was very the googly question, right? That was surprising because we had our opinions, but of course, it's the expertise that counts. The styles could be various and varied. So lots to learn today. Thank you.
Right. And Akash, I like the teaching style. I agree with Jill. You put us where we apply immediately what is being taught. So the retention, I think, is far greater there. And one key takeaway for me from this session is I've unlearned a lot more than learning, because I would refrain from using certain terms or words in, a loose as in a very disregarding way. I wouldn't use it that way. I would be more measured because it does mean something. And it was a revelation that DiSC is not only about communication, it's also about behavior. Again, there is my unlearning bit of what came out of this session. So all in all, good. I'm looking forward for the session tomorrow.
Great. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for all the interactions. I think that's what really makes these sessions more valuable. I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. We get deeper into DiSC. We discuss a change model that you can actually apply in various learning interventions and not just DiSC. So with that, I'm going to close the session now, and I hope you all have a good day ahead and a good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Everyone.
everyone. See you
Bye.
tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.